Hello guys, got another video today. Today we're going to go through some Battlefield 6 settings for you. Now I did make a Battlefield 6 beta sort of settings video. Now although a lot will still apply from that video, there's a lot of new things, new additions, a lot of new things to mention, and certain things have sort of changed as well. So we're going to go through that today. Primarily it's going to be sort of like PC stuff, you know, going to go into like config file, get some commands to give you more FPS, your sort of like FPS counter, that sort of thing, and you have some like controller settings for you today. We'll go into controller a bit more, and sort of like PS5 and sort of PS5 settings and stuff like that, right? So like always, I will leave timestamps in below so you can skip to whichever part. Hopefully this video isn't too long. I try and cut it down, but you know, I feel like I say that every time, but yeah, right, so let's get straight into it. So I think to start off, we're just going to go into like config changes and stuff like that. But first, we're going to the documents folder. We're going to go into Battlefield 6, go into settings, and we're going to go into this PROFSAVE _profile. And there's a few things we can change in here. Notepad will be perfectly fine. And we're just going to go through and just change a few things in here, or what I have changed. I think everything, these audio stuff, I don't think there's anything need to change there. From the beta, I'll just to be safe, this chromatic aberration, I'll just set that to 0, because there were times in the beta they would just keep turning on randomly, even if you're setting in game. Now it seems to be fixed in this launch build, but just to be safe, I'll just say, you know, just keep that at 0. What else have we got here? Like in my previous video, the ADS FOV, can't get that to work at the minute. I'll leave a little sort of video in the background where it is actually technically on, because I've got a 1x, but it's not. Technically 0 would be off. So I would just say, just leave that. This is changed from the beta video that I done, so I'd just say just leave that as it is. Just use a 1x, honestly. But yeah, FOV. Make sure your refresh rate is to your monitor's refresh rate. Future frame rendering set to 0. There's not a lot of FPS gain in this game of future frame rendering. It just increases input lag, so just keep that off. 0 would be off. Let's see what else we got here. Motion blur world 0. And there's one thing here I've recently made a video on. You may or may not have seen it, but it's weapon depth of field. Set that to 0, and you would turn off that sort of blur effect that's on your weapon, so you get that very sort of clean. And that's how you do it. You would set that to 0, and it would turn it off in game. And I don't think there's anything else to mention. Let me just quickly scan through. No, I think that's it. And then, you know, just make them changes, boom, save, you'll be good to go. Right, so I think we're just going to go into just quickly talk about config file. I have made a video recently on how to make a config file. It's got a lot of sort of more information on what the commands actually do and stuff like that. So I'm not going to talk about it too much today. So if you'd like to watch that video, I'll leave a little link or something in the description or something on that regards. But I think I'll just show you really quickly how to do it. So you would go into your Battlefield 6 fault in your drive where you have Battlefield 6 installed, sorry. I have it in my M.2. You would go, if you're on Steam, you go Steam Library, boom, Steam Apps, Common, and then it would be your Battlefield 6 folder would be in there. But for me, I'm on EA Apps, so I'd go Origin Games, and then Battlefield 6, here we go. And then this is the user config file that I'm doing in a minute. That's what I'm using here. It does have minus a certain thing if you've watched the other video recently, but I'm still sort of like chopping and changing, testing things, stuff like that. But this will be a good sort of go-to for anybody, I think. So what this does, it's got your FPS in the top left. We'll leave these commands in the description below, so you can just cut and paste into a config file sort of thing. And also, you know, for different resolutions as well. So when you say if you play at 4K or 1440p or 1080p, you know, you'll be able to apply this and get the FPS count and actually match up as well. So I'm just going to quickly go into how you would make a config file. So say you went into description, you got the config file, you go set file, save as, you go all files, and then you would set it as a user.cfg, and then you go boom, and then you would save, and then you would have FPS in the top left, and then you have a nice little sort of FPS gain with this light tile perf enable, great for your sort of 1%, 0.1% lows, and you'll sort of feel that in game. So yeah, that's how you make a config file. Like I said, if you want to go watch it in more detail, what all of these do, these commands, and in a bit more detail, you're more than welcome to go watch my previous video. And I don't want to talk about this too long. I just want to keep the sort of length down. Right, just one more thing before we move into in-game settings and stuff like that is just go talk about the EA app really quickly, and just go through a few settings. Usage sharing, I'd turn that off. Application updates. Open the app automatically, turn them off, turn off the notifications. In-game overlay. Now, in the Battlefield 6 beta, you would turn this on because there was a stuttering problem, and you had to have it on. Now, normally you wouldn't have EA in-game overlay on usually because it caused a lot of issue, input lag, all that sort of stuff. So you would turn it off. But in the beta, you had to turn it on because there was a stuttering FPS issue. But I'm happy to say that it's been fixed. You can safely turn it off, and you will be all good to go. So yeah, you can turn it off, and that'd be good. Download. I don't think there's anything else we need to mention here in the EA app. That's the only really big thing here. You can safely turn it off. Right. So I will see you in game. So here we are in Battlefield 6, and we're going to go straight into it, I think. And I think we're just going to start from the top. We're going to go into accessibility, menu narration. I've turned this off. I just don't like the voice going off all the time. Subtitles, I just turn off just to keep the UI a bit more cleaner. I think there's a lot of problems in this game with sort of like clutter and all that sort of thing. I just sort of turn it off. Subtitle settings, I have them off, so it doesn't really matter. Master volume, I've just turned that off just purely for this video. Because there's a lot of stuff going on in the background, like in the settings, but normally you would have that 100, so just ignore that, put that on 100. Color profiles, right? So we're just going to go into that. I actually have this at default. I quite like it on the default, and usually I sort of run Pro 10, but I don't really like the colors there. And good thing about Battlefield is just like the customizability, and you can change it to whatever you want. So particularly the enemy color, I think it's quite important to get your visibility problems fixed in here. So if you can sort of change it to whichever one you like, or whichever you see the enemy is the most seen. For me, it's a default. That's perfectly fine for me. You really want to get that on point. I think that's a good sort of recommendation to start off with. World brightness, I would say just leave this on 50. Now in previous games you'd sort of up it up in like Battlefield 5, let's say, get a bit higher brightness, but I'd say there's a lot of sort of brightness issues of like coming into buildings and going out of buildings, like it's too dark, it's too light, and I'd say just leave it at default. I think you do yourself a lot of favours here. Camera effects, you go in there, world motion blur just off, weapon motion blur off. Infantry HUD motion, I don't really like it. It's like that when you're sort of running, you can see the HUD sort of like find it very sort of motion sicknessy, so I sort of have that off. Camera shake amount, just take it down to 50. Perfectly fine. Reduce sprint camera bobbing. I'd turn this on so you don't want, any sort of bobbing or, anything sort of motion sicknessy. So I would say turn that on. Chromatic aberration, turn that off. Like I said, in the profile save, you can actually turn it off because there were times where it was coming on in games and stuff like that. But this is where they're saying you turn it off. Infantry crosshair projection. So what this is when you turn this off, your crosshair will be static on your screen. If you turn it on, it will be sort of floating and you won't get the point of reference. So I highly recommend turn this off. So your crosshair is static and it's not moving. you want to know where you are shooting and where your crosshair is, just keep that off. Where are we now? Controls. Infantry sprint, I have that on toggle. Crouch slide all, I have it on double tap for crouch. This one here, interact and reload, I have on reload tap, interact hold. Everything else is default. Okay. Moving on. Controller vibration, this is for the sort of first part of the... I might repeat myself in this because there's a lot of these settings of video very confusing. But controller, if you play on controller, I'd say just turn controller vibration off. Intensity, just take it down. Everything else is default. I think for myself in the minute, because the game's just come out, I've left menu tutorials on, in-game tutorials on, like hints, all these sort of hints, like stuff like that, like, oh, you can do this in-game. I've left that on just because I'm new to the game. Do you know what I mean? So I'd say, you can turn all these off if you want, but just because the game's just come out, I sort of left them on. But in future iterations of settings video, I'd probably turn all these off, honestly, once we get experience with the game. Yeah, so gameplay, invert, lurk, hold, toggle. Yep, I think I just went through these settings. Capture area outline. So what this does is it just sees the capture area of the objectives. I would say for now keep that on. Sensitivity, I'm not going to mention that here. I'm going to mention it later on in the video in the mouse and keyboard because I just don't want to sort of repeat myself constantly. Everything else is default. I don't think there's anything else to mention here. Vehicle, I'd say, your vehicle stuff, I'd say just mention, or your vehicle stuff, I'd say just match your infantry sensitivity sort of stuff. Aim assist, I'm going to mention that later. Campaign, it's all default. I'm not really here for that. Right, so we're going to go into the controller part of the video. So I've been playing a lot of sort of older builds in BF Labs on PS5 with controller. I've played on PC with controller, with PS5 controller. There's a few sort of like observations and a few things I've changed. I think sort of help you out. I'll just go into that straight away. So control settings, I think default is 40 for the aim sensitivity, I'm pretty sure. I've actually gone down a bit just because of settings I've changed later. And I think it might be preferential just to take it down a bit. But 30 seems like a good sense for me. Controller, I was still be able to be quite quick at turning in sort of close range gunfights, and it's sort of slow enough at sort of like bit sort of mid range, sort of capabilities, stuff like that. Invert, that's where you set if you play inverted. Field of view, I'm going to talk about that later. But I'd say, set your vertical. In previous game, Battlefield 5 2042, just set your vertical so your horizontal would probably be a bit more. I'd say set that to that. Do yourself a lot of favors, I think. Vertical aim ratio. Now, what this does, I think it was set, default it was like 40 or 50%. Now, I've set it to 100%. The reason is because when you have it at 100%, the crosshair will move the same distance as it does horizontally, so you get a 1-for-1 whilst aiming, if that makes sense. So if you go around in a circle like that, it's a 1-for-1. It's not quicker when you go vertically or something like that. I think it would be the same for sort of PC stuff. Keep that 100, and which is the reason why I've sort of gone slower. My sense is slower because you get it's a bit quicker, I think. Uniform soldier aiming, set that to on. I've always played 133, so that's why I play 133. Aim assist, I'd say just for now, keep this at 100%. On the aim assist, to slow down the zoom snap. I do sort of intend to look deeper into this as we go. Obviously the game's just come out, so we haven't had too much time on here, but I've got quite a lot to say anyway on the controller already. Yeah, so probably, but for now, I would say just keep everything 100% and just get used to the game, and then later on we'll sort of talk about input curve. But now I've left it as standard. I did try a bit of BF5, and I think I'm just going to go with standard for a minute. Stick input presets, just standard. And I don't think that really matters here. I think aim and left, right acceleration, you don't want any stick acceleration. I'll just turn this 0. Turn this 0, and that will help with just setting here vertical aim ratio on 100%. Both of these settings are very crucial, I think, for controller players. And both of them are exactly why I've sort of gone down a bit sort of slower the sensitivity. But yeah, these two settings, I'd say keep that off. Left and right, because you don't want any acceleration in aiming at all. If you can. I think it'll help in the long run if you have that on 0. Infantry sprint, I think everything else is default here. Crouch slide, I have double tap for crouch. This is all your uniform soldier aiming. If you have it on, keep that on. Yeah, one thing to mention is that interact to reload. So reload tap, interact, hold, set that on. I disabled the gyro because I wasn't sure whether the PS5 is going to be affecting or something. I don't know, PS5 controller would affect that, so I just disabled it. Flick look is a very interesting setting, and I intend to look into that in future videos. And I think that's all we got mentioned there. Buttons, I've set this to alternate, so if we go back into the previous menu, you can see here they actually changes your crouch, so your crouch is on the right thumbstick and the melee takedown is on circle. So that's what that does. So you can slide and aim at the same time. That's why you would have your crouch on your thumbstick, essentially. Default, that's default. Control settings, that's all for your vehicle. I'm going to be honest, I'm not really a vehicle player, so I don't know about vehicle. This is all aircraft, gunner, joystick. I think that's it for controller for the minute. Like I said, I'm going to be sort of playing with controller on and off in this game for the future. So there'll be sort of future videos going into more things and stuff like that. So keep a lookout for that if you like controller PC. Right, so mouse and keyboard section. Right, so here we go. We've got infantry mouse aim scenario, and we've got this beautiful setting here. It actually figures out your sensitivity whilst you move the slider. So like, just watch these numbers. So if you play 800 DPI, 1600 DPI, or 3200 DPI, you'll actually work out your sense for you. So I've actually measured this ADS sense and hipfire sense, and it is pretty much bang on. So you can sort of trust that stat. If you look there, like you can see it changing as I move. I think that's absolutely fine. I really like that, honestly. I really like that. I think I think that should be in a lot of games, honestly, and sort of like as an industry standard, you could say. So yeah, set your aim here. It's a lot easier now. Also, I would mention get your tape measure out, measure this for yourself. You can trust it and see that it works. This way you set the settings. Controls, I play uniform soldier aiming on. So if you don't know what uniform infantry aiming, so in previous time it was called uniform soldier aiming. So essentially what this does, it just makes all the sights in the game play at the sensitivity. So it doesn't matter if you're playing on a 1x, 1.5x, 2.5, 4x, whatever. Your sensitivity will be the same at the coefficient of what you set of 133. So I'd recommend generally just keep uniform soldier aiming on if you want to be consistent. I think a lot of sort of older veteran players play with uniform soldier aiming off. If you know what you're doing, you can sort of adjust the values here. You'd come down here and you can sort of adjust all these values, and for individual sites you can have different different sensitivities for different weapons. Say like your sniping versus your infantry, you know, sort of close quarters stuff, you'd have different sensors. Some people like that, but I'd say just generally for everyday use, I would say just keep uniform infantry aiming. Now it's good. I would say keep that on. So all your sensitivities are the same, so you can just forget about it. For the coefficient, I've always played at 133. I think default in this game is set to 178. So, you know, you're more than welcome just to leave it on 178, see how you feel. For myself, I've always played at 133, so I play 133. I would say you can try 0% as well. I've seen a lot of people really sort of say 0% is good in this game, so I just, you know, just experiment with it, see what you think. Give it a go. And I quickly set that back to 133. I can, right? Like I said, mouse input, mouse aim sensitivity. Yep, just mentioned that. Soldier, infantry zoom aim, 100%. I've measured this on, when I take measure, it works. 100% is, you know, exactly the same as your hip fire sense. Vertical mouse aim ratio, I would leave this at 100%. Like I mentioned in the controller section, you know, I wouldn't mess about with this setting. You know, you want your sense exactly the same as, you know, your vertical to your horizontal. You want it 100%. You want it exactly the same. You don't want any sort of variation there. So I'd say leave that alone. Obviously, field of view, I'll talk about that a bit later. Infantry sprint, click, crouch slide, double tap for crouch. That's what I have. That's where you would enter, interact to reload. I think everything else is default, honestly. What else have we got here? Infantry, passenger, keybinds. Now for me, I have a couple of, everything's pretty much default in the keybinds. Except here, if you're on mouse and keyboard, come down here and the look up, look down, look left, like, you know, it does have sort of like controller on the arrow. I think it's either controller or arrow keys on there. I'd just say, just go into it and hold escape just to clear them. I'd say do that, just to make sure there's no interference with, you know, with keys or like, you know, do you see what I mean? Like in 2042, we all know. So yeah, make sure that's like that. You clear them keybinds. What else we got? I have crouch toggle on mouse 4 and prone on mouse 5. That's just, you know, personal preference. You know, as you copy my settings if you'd like. Gadget 1 and 2, I have 3 on 4. And I think that is much it for keybinds. Everything else is default, honestly. Vehicles, like I said, I'm not really a vehicle player, to be honest. So, you know, I just match my sensitivity to my vehicle stuff, to my infantry stuff, sorry. Like I said, I'm not really a vehicle player. UI keybinds, okay, everything's default in there. Raw mouse input on, leave this on. I'm happy to say that, you know, I've sort of measured mouse input in the beta and stuff like that, and the mouse input actually works in this game. So yeah, what a fantastic thing that is. Right, so we're going to keep graphics now. There's lots to talk about in here. Performance preset, I'll set that to custom. Graphics quality custom. Graphics quality settings. We're going here first now. I set everything to low because, you know, I want the lowest latency, the highest FPS that I can get. And I've just turned everything off. And I would say, you know, Battlefield 6, quite a hard game to run. For myself, I'm getting like 120, 130 FPS at 1440p. You know, it's an FPS game, competitive shooter. You know, you want FPS is you know, very important in games like this. So I'd say just set it on low, do yourself a lot of favors. World brightness, UI brightness, just all on 50%. Go into the advanced section, fixed resolution scale. I'd leave this 100%. So if you change this, you could get sort of like little FPS boost here if you can. But I would say generally just just keep this 100%. So 100% would be your native resolution. So it would be 2560 by 1440 for me. So that's what that would. If you take it down to say like 75%, it'd be like the internal resolution would be like 1080p, I think. But correct me if I'm wrong there. But I'd say just keep that. Do yourself a lot of favors. Just keep that 100%. Frame rate limiter, if you can. I'd say, just from my experience of in games, FPS games, if you do cap my FPS, I generally use Afterburner or RTSS. I think just generally it's better than a lot of sort of in-game frame rate limiters. So I'd recommend using Afterburner, honestly, if you are going to frame rate. But if you don't want that, more than welcome to use that. Dynamic resolution scale, video reflex, low latency should be enabled. Just get lower. Just get lower latency. I would just say just enabled. Sometimes if you have enabled plus boost, sometimes you have like crashing issues and stuff like that. Generally, so I'd say just generally have it enabled, and then try it with enabled per boost. But you get like crashing issues and stuff like that, I would say just keep it enabled. Anti-aliasing, I would say turn it off. You get a sort of nice FPS gain with this, and yeah, I would say it's a fantastic little setting to have. Upscaling technique, you can use. I would say you can use sort of DLSS quality. I'd say you can try and use native resolution or DLSS quality, and although you probably get less FPS maybe than say native res and anti-aliasing off, it's always there for you. It does look quite nice actually. I'm not gonna lie. Frame generation, I wouldn't generally recommend frame generation. The input lag's very bad. And I would recommend not having it off. In single player games, yeah. Multiplayer games, I would say off. Future frame rendering, I would keep this off. You don't get any, like in previous Battlefield games, you turn this on, you get insane FPS gains. In this game, you don't. You just get more input lag. So I'd say just leave this off and forget about it. Performance overlay, if you want. See my config file videos, and what I mentioned previously earlier, you got the FPS counter in the top left side. If you have this off, it will not show up. So keep this on simple, and you can see it in the top left. So keep that on. That's quite important saying actually. Right. So here we go. Field of view. Right. So I'd say in previous games it was always on the vertical FOV, and I've just matched my Battlefield 5's vertical FOV to 79. So in Battlefield 5 it'd be 79.95, but in this game the field of view is slightly different. So I just set the vertical FOV to 79, and then horizontal is just slightly more. So you're more than welcome to just copy your vertical sense from previous Battlefield games, or just go in between. Just go like 74. So if you played on 79, you'd go like 74, and then you go like 105 or something like that. But I'd recommend, obviously, field of view. I've sort of made field of view videos in the past. Talk about field of view. Generally, it's more sort of like play style. If you're quite an aggressive player, like to get stuck in, getting in there. You generally higher FPS is sort of more favourable just for that sort of play style, but at the cost of you sort of lose visual clarity at range, so you're not going to be able to see people at sort of at longer ranges. The sort of more lower FOV you go, you do sort of gain that mid-range sort of capabilities because you can see them sort of people, but you lose that sort of peripheral vision. The higher FOV has sort of like aggressive scenarios. So I think it just comes down to play style. What your play style is. You're quite an aggressive player, just up it a bit. If you're a bit, play quite slower and you like the sort of mid-range, like use like sniping, using the DMRs, stuff like that. Maybe just just lower the FOV. It's personal preference really. And also, just a quick mention, there is a sort of FPS gain with FOV. And, the higher the FOV, the more FPS you do gain. Just leave like a little thing in the background there. From the lowest FOV to the max FOV, you gain roughly about 10 FPS. So, it's not a lot, but it does help. Weapon field of view, I'd set this to wide. Weapon motion blur 0, world motion blur 0, camera shake 50. I think I've talked about this before. Yep, bobbin, turn it on. Chromatic aberration, turn it off. Vignette, is that how you say it? Turn that off. Film grain, turn that off. Now, full screen, generally, FPS games, gaming in general, you want sort of full screen generally. If you have sort of any problems with, say, like Afterburner not showing up, you can probably see it. Yeah, I've got Afterburner here. But sometimes if it doesn't show up, I'd say just switch to borderless, switch back to full screen. It seems to fix a lot of issues in this game like that, sort of if things aren't showing up, or so just if you have any problems, just switch to borderless, or apply, go back to full screen, apply, and it seems to fix a lot of stuff. Yeah, resolutions, I play at 1440p, so 1440p in there. Aspect ratio 16.9. Refresh rate 240, 1440p. But VSync, turn VSync off generally. Show HUD, Infantry, HUD, motion. Yeah, like I said before, I'm not really a fan. I'm not really a fan of that sort of motion sickness sort of vibes I get from that, so I'd turn that off. Sovis filter, I would keep this on, because I think visibility is quite hard in this game, and I would say keep this on. It just gives like a sort of like a halo effect around sort of players. It's sort of more visual, I think, so keep that on. Advanced HUD. Padding, I quite like this saying. I've still to play around with that, but I think for now, just default. Show kills made by all. I think default it's squad and nearby. I've always played with all, because I like to see a lot of stuff. Do you know what I mean? I like to see who's killing everybody, and mini map size. I think everything mini map size wise is just default. I'm quite happy with default in the minute. I think everything else is pretty much right. So HUD icons. Now this is quite an important one. I've been playing around this for the past couple of days, sort of trying to match it to my Battlefield 5 settings as well. And this is very important for sort of visibility issues and stuff like this. So we're just going to go into it, right? Ping hints, I've sort of left that on for the minute. A new game, I'm a new player, I'm a noob, just like everyone else. I wanted to see what's going on and stuff like that. Later on in the game, you might turn off when you get a bit more experienced. Aim-based icons opacity. So basically, all these settings are here are just for trying to reduce clutter on screen. I think this game is very guilty of that. It's just markers going off, like objective markers, like revive markers. There's everything. It's quite hard to see people a lot of the time. And for this aim-based icons opacity, I'd say I'd leave all of this default. I'd say it's not really worth it, honestly. I'd say just leave that default. Don't worry about that. These are the settings you want to change. So basically, these are the objective icons. So objective icons opacity. So when you're zoomed, so essentially when you're ADSing, I've set this to 0. I don't want to see objective icons when I'm in gunfights and ADSing and stuff like that. So I'd say to 0. The same with the occluded. So basically when objectives are like behind walls and stuff like that, I'd say I just want that off. Honestly, I don't want to see an objective marker through a wall and stuff like that. I don't want to see that, or being obstructed by other players or tanks or stuff like that. You want it sort of clean, so I'd say turn that off as well. It's pretty much just all the ADS icons. You just want to turn them off, so you can only see enemies. That's your priority, is just to only see enemies. Friendly icons I've just set to 30%, so I can still see who's who, like in relation to. It works quite well. Friendly revive icons, I'd say just 0 again. This will help in maps like Empire State and stuff like that. It works really well. There's a lot of sort of infantry focused sort of map, you could say, and there's a lot of revive icons everywhere, and just cleaning that up it really helps, honestly. The same here, squad icons I set at 30, squad revive icons zoomed 0. enemy scale. I did sort of mess about with this, and I would just say just leave it default. The smaller you go lower, it just makes it too small. Go higher, it goes a bit. It gets bigger, but it's a bit too far ahead above their head, if you see what I mean. It doesn't scale quite well, so I'd say just leave it 100 and you'll be fine. Opacity, enemy icons opacity. Whilst your ADS, you want that 100%. You want that 100%, so it just stands out when you see. So when your ADS, your squad will only be 30%, but the priority is the enemy. Do you know what I mean? So keep that on 100%. Neutral icons, ADS 0. Again, ping markers 0. I think these settings are quite crucial, honestly. I think I would like to experiment with them more with time. And I'd say, yeah, if you can, either copy this or play about with them, because these are quite important, I'd say. Yeah. Where are we now? Crosshairs and indicators. Crosshair opacity, I'd say leave that at 100. Crosshair intensity 60 is pretty good. Color, you're more than welcome to. This is where you change your color. I like white for the minute. Crosshair thickness, I'd say this actually helped me out quite a lot, actually. I think the default it's like, it's quite sort of very thin. And I'd say, sort of, just thicken it up a bit so it's more visible. Because it sort of helps me out as well, honestly. I like that as well. You can change when changing the color. You can see it with shadows, mid-tones, and then the brights. You can still sort of see. I think that's really cool. That's really cool saying. So you can actually see how color interacts and how the thickness and stuff interact. I think that's really cool. Infantry crosshair projection. I think I mentioned this earlier. You don't want your crosshair floating about. You want it static. You want it static at the center of your screen, so you know where your crosshair is. I think keep that off. Hit indicators, where you can change your hit indicators. Now, for me, I'd say maybe not so much in this game, because headshot multipliers aren't as much as, say, previous games. Like obviously I played Battlefield 5. The headshot was in like 1.8. Was it 2 times 2 damage? So it was really important if you get headshot in Battlefield 5. Maybe not so much in this game, but I think I've just pretty much just copied my sayings. So headshot color, just something really bright. You know that you've got a headshot. It's maybe, like I said, maybe not as important as previous games, but you do get a multiplier when you do get headshots. So you kind of want to know that you've done more damage to an opponent, let's say. So good sort of bright color that you can see that you've got headshot. Kill confirmed color. I've always had it on black. I've experimented with like a sort of pink color. It's kind of nice as well, actually. So like as a suggestion, if I can get my words out. Hit indicator numbers. So what this does is you want that enabled. So next to your crosshair when you're shooting, you get the damage numbers to the left or to the right. I think you can change it which way. I think only thing I've changed is I've just default it's small, and I'd say just change it to large, so you can really see the numbers and the damage that you're doing. I'd say that's a good tip. Damage indicator, I think leave that. I think chat visibility, I've set it to hide, so when you join a game it's already hidden. Chat settings, because I have it on hide, but you can change the size here. I've made the chat scale to 50%, so it's really small. I think generally it's quite big. The chat's quite big in this game, so like I said, with visual UI clutter, I'd say just obviously it's personal preference, but at default it's 100%. I think it's a bit too big, honestly. So I'd say at least do it to like 75, or less. I just done it to 50, so it's very small. Yeah, more than welcome to copy that. And I think that is all for the graphics settings. Audio, master volume, just for this video, I've turned that to 0 because there's all sorts of stuff going on in the background. So, but normally you set that to 100%, leave that, ignore that. But just for the video. Music, again, same reason. Just for this video, I've turned it to 0. Usually I'd have it like 50%, so it's not sort of overbearing. Hit indicators, I've left it on. Headphones default mix. Generally the audio is quite good in this game, like the jets and the vehicles and stuff like that going over. But for footsteps, it's not really that good in this game. I think the footsteps are really hard to hear a lot of the time. I think just headphones is just, you'd be good to go. So I think don't look into footsteps too much. I say obviously experiment with it as well. But I think headphones default mix, I think you'd be just good to go. Enable voice chat, I've turned that off. Subtitle settings, turn it off. Enable radio music, I've turned that off just purely because I make videos and stuff, so I don't want any of that sort of stuff interfering. Install, uninstall, you can uninstall the campaign and stuff like that. I think that's really cool. That's a nice setting to have. Need a bit of room. PC, I'd say command console, keep that on so you can turn on the console on there. You can change like light tile path and stuff like that in the menu. I think it's really cool. Keep that on. Streamer mode, anonymous mode. I think this is a really cool setting. I think at the minute I'm sort of playing with it off because I like to see names and who I'm playing against and stuff like that. But later on in this game, it'd be good to have that on. Enable radio music, I'll turn that off. Like I said, mini map. I think for me the mini map's just default. That's perfect for me. I think it's that visual sort of clutter as well with the mini map. You want to sort of clean, don't you? I think if you take it a bit higher, you could sort of remove that sort of visual clutter. Scoreboard ping, keep that on so you can, when you look on the scoreboard, you can see everyone's ping. That'd be good to have. Network graph, network widgets. Yeah, you have that on so you can see that. So you can see all your network problems and stuff like that. And I think that's all the settings. Exit game. I don't want to exit the game. Yeah, I think that's everything for the settings video. Like I said, with sort of future iterations, when we spend more time with the game, there's probably going to be a few more little tweaks here and there that we could sort of talk about and stuff like that. So I think for now, I'm quite happy with it. Yeah, hopefully it's not a long video. I'll try and cut it down as much as I can. Hopefully like I said, I've left the timestamps in so it can help you out. You can just skip to whichever part you'd like to. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. Trying to grow the channel in Battlefield 6. Hopefully got a lot more videos to make and hopefully get some good videos for you to watch, and a lot more sort of like controller settings as well in the future. I want to sort of like put a bit more time into controller and stuff like that. So yeah, look out for that in the future. Yeah, subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you boys in the next one.